I taught myself how to play music, and I just stuck with it, and I did it all the time. And sooner or later, people in the neighborhood heard about me, and then they started to talk about me. And it wasn't in a teasing fashion, it was more like, wow, look what he can do. And there's something about having people around you giving you support that is, it's motivating. From that point on, I've been having to deal with a lot of things, getting teased a lot in school, and
So it started with me and Prince because my mother and father split. And my mother moved into a sort of an upper middle class black neighborhood. And so I had to go to a new school. The first day, they did roll call. I had to choose somebody to stand next to. And then I saw this kid. So I'll go stand next to this guy. The kid turned out to be Prince. He said he was in the music. I said, yes, so am I. I said, what do you play? He said he played piano. And I said, well, I play bass and a little guitar. He said, we should jam. So we went over to his father's house and we started jamming. I looked on his piano. And who do I see playing bass in his father's band but my dad? Turns out our fathers played in band together. So that's kind of how we got together. And then Prince lived with my family for a number of years. It was a beautiful time. It was really great to have somebody my age that was into what I was into as passionately as I was. I lived in the attic. My room was up there. His room was in the basement. And we both played and we both wrote. And so I'd write a song and I'd say, hey, man, you got to check this out. And I'd play it for him. And then he'd write a song and he'd come upstairs and say, you got to check this. And we would perform, do gigs. We would do a lot of our original songs. We do some of his and some of mine. So we were constantly around each other and constantly engaged in music, writing music and making music and jamming.
I was about 13, that's when I had a band, and I have to admit it was work because I had to take records and dissect them and take each part and teach it to each member of the band, stuff like that, and it was pretty sickening. I just looked at it as something I had to do.
I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about how to play guitar. I learned how to put chords together originally from him. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know whether he would admit that he learned something from me. Who knows? Through that process, we just sort of naturally developed a style by us doing what we did and playing together.
When we were in Grand Central, there was nobody in front. You know what I mean? There was no front man. Morris would come from behind the drums and sing Love Won't Let Me Wait, one song, maybe two. And nobody was in front. There was no lead.
He would write a song, and I'd say, that's great. And, I wouldn't say that was my song or that was his song or anything. I would just think that was our song. It was great. I don't try to say, oh, he ripped me off or anything like that. I think we just had a bond. And, it was a beautiful time to have that bond and to come up and be able to do music.
I was in this band. We were helping build in the back room for free rehearsal. We were kind of painting it or doing whatever, wrecking it. It was a studio I referred to as Moon Sound.
We had a terrible manager and it was going nowhere. I didn't like doing other people's songs. I liked doing our own songs. They were far more true to life than the rest of the stuff I was singing about. I was singing about flowers and trees and cornflakes and stuff like that. And our originals were about what the teenagers were into at that time. Drugs and sex and music. And when the community we lived in and played around, they didn't want to hear about that. They wanted to hear about the flowers and the trees and how wonderful life was and how wonderful life would be if you were with me and that kind of stuff.
Let's time travel. Let's go back to probably around October 1976 when Chris Moon brought me the demo tape that they were working on.
Prince came back from New York after I'd lined him up with his first record company meeting. Both of us were a little astounded that the record company hadn't heard a hit.
Yeah, I went out to New York and I got turned down my first time, but I just wasn't going to be put down.
So I decided that what I needed to do was to try and find some talent, some managerial type talent here in town.
This kid calls me up and he says, I've got the next greatest thing on the face of the earth. And I said, I've heard that a million times. All right, come on into my office, play me this demo. So he puts it on and said, you know what? This is the real thing. Who's the group? He says, sit down. I said, come on. Okay. He says, well, it's one kid. He's 16. He's playing all the instruments, writing everything, and singing all the voices, and it's all him. I sat down and I said, "Does he live here?" He said, "Oh, he's in New York visiting his sister." I decided that I would probably try to manage him. I called him. I came back and I met him.
Predominantly black area of Minneapolis. There was over north and there was over south. Over north was where Prince lived. Jimmy and Terry were more south side. Prince's cousin Chaz, Morris, Andre, obviously, they were all living over north. And then the door opened and it's Andre. And I'm going, damn, he's good looking too. Was there a lab down there turning out beautiful, gorgeous, talented guys, And then Andre's mom came to the door. And when I saw Andre's mother, Bernadette, I could see that she was helping these kids. She was giving them a home. And I wanted to see the famous basement, that they had been telling me about. I did notice how tight Andre and Prince were.
There were rumors in the company that there was this young kid that was rather amazing, and he was talking. I know he was talking to A&M. He was talking to 2 or 3 other companies.
And my first thing was we got to get our rear ends out to the West Coast. We got to make a record deal for him as soon as possible, and it has to be first class. And we made presentations to all these labels.
Word spread very quickly about what I could do. A lot of people knew about it. I was taken out to Los Angeles by my first manager, whose name escapes me. Other people started getting to see what I could do.
This one fateful day, I was just walking from Studio B to the front door, and I heard this sound coming out of wide open Studio A. I just looked in there, saw the fro first, and just this sound. And he was working on Baby, and he stopped. I got the half turn. Just the eyes moved, but different electricity current than anything I've ever felt. I just sat down. He was just a guy recording at that point. He just looked at me with that horrified look. Who are you? And what are you doing in my chair? Just kind of listening. Just go ahead, play it. That's amazing. What's going on here? Nothing. Yeah, sure. And then Chris Moon walked in. What are you doing in here? It's, this is Prince and everything. I said, oh, okay. I didn't know this was like a nuclear. The first laugh I got out of him was the connection.
What it taught him was that's why he didn't want to be in L.A. He did not want people walking into my studio with a cup of coffee. I want to do this as hidden as possible and just create my work, because we had to redo the Chris Moon tapes. They weren't of demo quality to present to major record labels. The studio put in a new soundboard. It just wasn't working. So the executive producer, Tommy Vaccari, said, we got to go back to LA and make this album. I said, no. I'll compromise. We'll go to San Francisco, because not as easy to pop in on us and all this other kind of stuff.
And making this record at the record plant in Sausalito. And Prince and myself and my wife and Andre Cymone get on a plane and move out there and set up shop. At one point, all these honchos from Los Angeles came up to San Francisco to see how we were doing in the studio. So Lenny said to him, well, shouldn't there be a bass guitar in that song? And Prince looks at him and he says, ow.
We took him in the studio, and I really didn't want him to think he was auditioning. We just wanted to see what he did, And we started with the guitar, put the drums on, and you could tell he had it covered. We were in the control booth. He was sort of sitting on the floor. So I'm stepping over him. He looked up at me and he said, don't make me black, that he's competing with everyone. Named artists from different genres, the Beatles, Sly and Family Stone, Eric Clapton. I mean, went on and on and on. There's an enormous amount of ambition, the ambition to be great.
I always thought I was bad. I wouldn't have got in the business if I didn't think I was bad.
From Mo Austin down, there was this understanding and desire to give the artist as much freedom as possible. On the other hand, there were people at the top that kind of wanted to quietly sort of go into the studio and make sure everything was okay, and what was he really capable of, and I'll go in and let him play me some stuff, and he wasn't having it. He wasn't having a bar of it.
It was difficult for me to produce my album. At that age, they didn't want me to produce my own records for that reason. I thought I was young and inexperienced, so they got an executive producer on my first album. I wanted to make it good and bereft of mistakes, and in the process, it took a long time to make, and probably why I don't listen to it anymore. For that reason, it was a perfect record, and I don't know, it was too scientific.
His first album hadn't really even made a splash. It was just starting to come out, and it hadn't even really, first albums are first albums.
They got an executive producer on my first album. Well, he was supposed to help me cut corners and things like that, and basically teach me the studio, but he didn't. So it took a long time to do the album. It's pretty painstaking.
After Prince's first album, at the time, we didn't really have a lot of money. It was like he had a record deal, spent the money making the album. There's no band when the first one for you was done. He was like, man, you got to be in my band. I never, ever thought I would play in somebody's band. This was never an idea, it was never a dream I had. But once he did get a record deal, we worked it out. I said, look, you're doing a 3-album deal, 3 albums, that'd be enough for you to get, obviously get started and get good and on your way and established and,
I came new to it because the history from the whole flight time of Alexander O'Neill and everything, and Prince wanted a rock drummer. Obviously, some stuff happened with Morris.
Song I wrote called Mad Boy.
When I auditioned, my final audition was at Williams Pub, and I was playing with, I believe, Barry Goldberg and the Highway 52 band. I did a drum solo on a song called Mad Boy, and that sealed it. It was a good night, and I sat down with Andre and Prince, and again, I had to make sure that their table was ready, because, if there was something wrong, I said, if this isn't right, this guy's going to turn around and leave, like before you can even look at him. So, I had this down. So I had people waiting, this is like back then. How you would treat him at the most famous, I knew how to treat him with the most unfamous, because he still would turn around and disappear. So they got them in the front, and they were part of a great ovation.
Thank you. We'll see you at Williams Pub on Thursday. Thank you. Good night.
Warner Brothers recording artist seeks guitarist and keyboardist. The meeting came about through an ad in a local music paper. I heard about him before I met him, knew that there was nobody else within 600 miles of the Twin Cities at the time that was signed with any major label, so I knew who it was. So I called, set up an audition, pulled up. They were 2.5 hours late. It was him, Andre Cymone, Bobby Z. Well, for me, I had to be somewhere. So I walked up to Owen Husney. I'm so sorry, but would it be okay if I went first? So I just kind of walked up, plugged in. Prince walked up. He just nodded and sat down, started playing keyboard. I just kind of fell in behind him, played rhythm until he looked over and soloed for a minute, said what I thought I had to say, then went back to playing rhythm. Prince took me on the parking lot. We talked for about 10 minutes after the 15 minutes of playing, and that was it.
The audition was lots of fun. See, Andre was there. Bobby Z was there. They were already in Prince's band. It was in his house on France Avenue. And I remember walking in, seeing all these people sitting on the couch waiting for their turn. They were doing the audition downstairs in the basement. 3 months after I had auditioned for the band with Prince, he called me and he said, "Hello, Gayle, this is Prince. What are you doing?" "I'm taking a nap, but I'm awake now." He said, "Can you come to practice? We're starting in an hour." And I said, "Yeah." I hopped out of bed and headed out the door.
Well, things were just kind of in the beginning stages of the whole Prince thing. And then once Bobby was officially brought on board to be the drummer, played me the demo. And of course, first thing out of my mouth was, "Who's the band?" "It's one guy." So I said, "Well, who is this guy?" And he goes, "He's a kid named Prince. Let me know when he's ready to form a band." Prince had hired another keyboard player already. So for whatever reason, he decided to go and work for another artist out in L.A., and Prince didn't have the patience to wait for him. The window of opportunity reopened, and I called Bobby and Prince's manager. October of 1978, I received an audition. I had the opportunity to try out for the group. I had his record deal, he put the album out. I had worked on the single, which was Soft and Wet. And he said, "Did you learn So Blue?" I said, "No, there's no keyboards on it anyway." And he laughed. My first meeting was literally a jam session. About 3 weeks later, he made his decision to bring me on board. First of all, you had Dez Dickerson on guitar, and then you had Gayle Chapman on the other keyboards, Andre Cymone, of course, and myself and Bobby to play for the Warner Brothers executives. The Whisperers at that point then organized this Capri Theater thing, that performance. It was pretty dismal. Prince had his back to the audience. He hadn't put it together yet.
This showcase gig was at the Capri Theater early January of '79.
We were all between the ages of 18 and 22 when this whole thing started. The first show at the Capri, they asked us at one of the rehearsals to get the original tunes that we wanted to tribute. I had written an instrumental. Andre had one, Through You. Dez had a tune called Disco Away. It was a great night, packed house. Great for Prince, it was great for the band, and it was a great first step out. And it was one of those stepping stones that got us out to LA and helped us prepare for things like the Midnight Special and American Bandstand.
And when he did the Capri, it was his first time actually being in the front doing a Prince show. And he completely got stage fright. I looked at the side of the stage and he was just sick.
I was tired, like 80% of the show. I was just exhausted because of the energy that was in the room. It's not good to be too nervous when you go on stage. You lose energy quickly. It was pretty scary.
Finally, he just sort of snapped out of it. He came and jumped on stage, and I thought it was great. I mean, I know that they reviewed it, said it wasn't great, but obviously it was his first time. So trying to find out what he wanted to do, what works, what doesn't work, and and being a frontman, because being a frontman is not an easy gig. It's one thing if you got other people, which is how we used to have in Grand Central, because, I'd be working my side of the stage, you'd be working his side of the stage, and you didn't have the responsibility wasn't all on your shoulders.
Warner's guys said, we think it's time to start the second album. Get that going. And keep rehearsing the band to get it tighter. We weren't ready.
I think it was right, but hey, what do they say about Monday morning quarterbacking? It's always true and it's always useful.
Well, I worked a long time under a lot of different people, and most of the time I was doing it their way, and that was cool, but, I figured if I worked hard enough and kept my head straight, one day I'd get to do it on my own, and that's what happened. So I feel like I don't try to hurt nobody, and like I said, keep my head on straight. My way usually is best way.
So we went back to the drawing board early summer of '79, and we rehearsed, for a few months, and then embarked upon a September showcase tour, just going and doing these little clubs all over. The Bottom Line in New York. We did the Roxy on Sunset. Did about a total of like 13 or 14, but we missed the last 3 because Prince developed laryngitis. We had to cancel, and then they decided not to reschedule.
I sold my contract to other managers, and I held on to a lot of rights, which I settled later on. So everything turned out very nicely.
And then Perry and Tony came. Perry and Tony were the road managers for Twin Fire.
Owen Husney did a great job to get him a record deal, but Salt and Wet was overproduced, and they went way over budget. Prince wasn't happy with the outcome.
If you owe Warner Brothers Records money and you're trying to make another record and you're trying to build a band.
Peppy Willie, his uncle, is in Little Anthony and Imperials. And so he had asked, Prince and myself if we wanted to write some songs for him. And we were like, yeah, because this was like, we could make some money, because obviously we didn't have a lot of money. So we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we make some money and so we wound up going out there to do that. And so that was going to be one of the songs. And, he had written some songs. And oddly enough, Feel For You was one of the songs, that was written for that particular project.
It was at Lecture Ladyland Studios. Sly and I were real good friends. It would have been nothing for him to call me anywhere I was. He could find me. I was in a hotel, and I get a phone call. And I'm up here at the studio. You want to come down here? I thought it was him on the phone. Sound just like him. No, it's okay, I'll be down there in a minute. She told me where it is. So he told me where it was, and I went down there looking for Sly. The studio is dark and cold. I said, what the f-? I said, there's nothing going on. So I just went all the way to the back, found the booth with a light in it, one guy in there by himself, and then there's one engineer. So this is very un-Sly-like. So I went and looked in the booth, and I went in, and there's a little short guy in there, with a big guitar playing the shit out of it, my dad. So when he saw me, he put down the guitar. He said, that was me on the phone. I said, okay, nice to meet you. I have to go. And I left. I said, hey, to the engineer, who is that? He said, that's Prince. I said, Prince? Prince of what? When his album came out, I was really impressed. The album was getting ready to be done with. They had done maybe 2 or 3 singles on it, but they hadn't released I Feel For You. I said, I'm going to redo this sucker here.
With his recent #1 solo hit, here's Prince and his first top 40 single. At number 11 here, I Want to Be Your Lover.
Prince was bound and determined to have it done his way. We did American Bandstand, and we did Midnight Special. That was a huge deal. He told us all not to smile and not to speak.
I don't remember him saying that. Very well could have been, but I've heard that, and I wouldn't doubt it.
And we did what he said. When he started interviewing him, and Prince did his shy act and, using fingers to tell him how many years he'd been, none of us really understood any of that. We just kind of went along with it.
I just know that, when it happened, I was like, okay. If you look at it, he's holding up his fingers, his hands are kind of shaking. He's nervous. That's a pretty major thing if you think about it. We're from Minneapolis, first of all, we weren't even supposed to get off the city block. Everybody in the neighborhood was like, you guys are never going to get off the city block. We got off the city block. And there we were on, American Bandstand. You don't really get much bigger than that. And so that was a big deal.
When Dick Clark asked me, who's the lovely lady, I couldn't help but crack a smile. I was so happy to be there. All of those were done in one trip down to L.A. So that we did American Bandstand and we did Midnight Special.
We had just done American Bandstand, and at that point, really didn't know if people were paying attention or not. we thought we were awesome, but back then you really didn't know.
Because we were in Huntsville, Alabama, we were in Jacksonville, Florida, we were in New York, California. I mean, we were all over the U.S.
There was a show we did in Denver, Rainbow Music Hall, 1,500 capacity theater. We do this show. The show sold out. It was like a Hard Day's Night. I mean, it was like nuts. We got chased like a caravan of fans. So that was a hint. I mean, that night was absolutely amazing. I mean, they broke windows. It was a record, and it had the different personalities of the different members of the band.
It was a band.
Yeah, Andre and I, Gayle Chapman was the keyboard player at the time. Personally, maybe you know something I don't, but I don't know what happened to it.
That might be a good question that they can answer, because I certainly don't know the answer to that.
Prince wasn't a big talker.
It was a decision that was never really clearly articulated to us.
That was Prince's decision, and if he wasn't forthcoming with an answer, we didn't have one.
The whole idea was to get the band and occupy them until we did his next record. We probably could have gone off and done other things. So rather than have us scramble out into different areas and go do solo things, it might be a good idea to give them something to occupy themselves. I think what happened, because the record company, they wanted Thrill You or Kill You to put out a single with one of the band members, their song as the lead single. It could maybe be successful, which would change sort of, you could lose a certain amount of control.
Although he was, childhood friends with and lived with Andre and his family, he was on a mission, and rightfully so.
Some of my family members felt a little bit on the outside of the success that they felt a part of.
It was supposed to be actually Prince and Andre, Cymone.
He got the deal, but and he was like, man, look, we should do this thing together. Do like a Brothers Johnson kind of thing.
Because Prince and Andre at the time were like brothers. It wasn't Prince the star. It was Prince and Andre, the guys that had grown up and had lived in Andre's basement. We're going to do this thing together.
But Prince was about Prince. Sometimes he was not such a nice person. In the meantime, now we get our first gold and platinum record. I'm just now getting ready to have my first child. They know I need money, so they're just squeezing it out of me just a little bit at a time. Well, I go to Quincy Jones, who I had worked with Brothers Johnson, and I said, Quincy, I need for you to do this, that, and whatever. He said, Perry, I can't right now because I'm in the studio with Michael, and we're doing Off the Wall. Well, while I'm in the studio talking to Quincy, Prince is outside in the car. Prince wants to do The Time, and he wanted the Rolling Stones tour. So he thought Cavallo Ruffles could do that.
Dirty Mind was exciting. From the second album to Dirty Mind, it's a big leap. The biggest leap of all. Wow, there's something going on here. He figured out who he wanted to be in more of a rebellious way. Music business was quite separated as far as what was promoted. The white rock part of Warner Brothers Records, and then there was the black department, as they called it then. Dirty Mind was challenging for the R&B department at that time. First of all, the album cover itself, what he was wearing on the album cover itself, and the lyrical content.
There was a high level of uncomfortability, and at that time, that was so far over the top that management, the label, everybody was nervous about it at some level. A lot of things went on. I mean, that record was almost the end rather than the beginning on a lot of fronts behind the scenes. So we knew that it was very different from what was going on at the time, and I think everybody had their different kind of facet of it that they embraced. For me, the thing that was exciting about it is I was the rock and roll guy. I was just really excited about trying to push further in that direction. So for me, that record was a triumph in that regard, in that we became much more of a rock band.
I know as far as the music was concerned, some of that stuff came out of jam sessions because we used to jam a lot. I have some of those jam sessions where I'm playing, and a lot of the stuff is not exactly the same, but very similar. I'm not trying to take any credit. It's not like Prince couldn't have wrote that stuff without me, or it's not like I can't write stuff without him. But I have this stuff. These are original versions. It's me playing on them, but eventually they become me not playing on them. There's the same thing. It's just that instead of me actually playing on them, it says somebody else is playing on them, but it's the same stuff. And so, that's where it got a little bit weird. It'd be like if I had a jam session with my band and my band were just jamming and came up with these parts, and then I came and said, oh, great part, I'll play them all. Something about that don't seem quite right, but it does get a little bit weird, and I can see how people could look at that and say that's not really right.
I left just prior to it coming out and him hiring Lisa. So Lisa's picture is on the back, but in the credits, my name is there, and I felt boxed in. And people have intimated that I left because of religious reasons, didn't want to sing the song. Excuse me, it's a song about a blowjob. Not everybody wants to sing a song about a blowjob. Okay, so I'll admit I didn't really want to sing it. I suggested a few word changes in the song, and Prince said, "No, it's my damn song. We're going to sing it my way." I said, "Fine, I don't want to sing it." That was pretty much the end of that. I got up one day and I just knew I was going to give notice. Called him up one morning. We talked for about an hour in his living room, and he's got a lot going for you. I don't think you'll have any problem finding anybody to take my place. If I'm going to quit, it's going to be now because it's going to be better for you as far as timing to find somebody. Then he was able to find Lisa fairly quickly, so that worked well. And yet the last thing he said to me was, "Gayle, if you ever need help with anything, you just call me." I was never able to get a hold of him.
He really stepped out, of course, in Dirty Mind. The whole look.
People in New York loved it. Critics loved it. We played the Ritz, and it was monumental. Everybody was at that show in New York.
Very intense.
An up-and-comer. He was pulling the stars in.
You know, Mick Jagger and David Bowie, Andy Warhol, Gene Simmons.
Kiss guys were there.
I mean, it was
an explosion, definitely. Saturday Night Live, we did Party Up.
When we first did Saturday Night Live, Prince wanted to be spectacular. At the end of Party Up, he was like, "Just run off the stage, just push everything over and run off the stage." So we did that. And the producers were like, "Where are you going?"
Right before we did Saturday Night Live is when I officially was like, "I'm out." I said, "Look, I'll do that and do the European thing, and then
We went to Europe. There, everything's different. The integration, the racial integration, the thought integration, the freedom. There was people with blue spiked mohawks. It was just a completely different mindset to what we think as punk rock that came out of CBGBs. Prince was very excited about the reception in London, Paris, and Amsterdam at the Paradiso, those first 3 shows. He had a real positive outlook coming off the Ritz show.
Dirty Mind was so impressive. It just seemed like a debut album. It was such a change over his earlier work. Beyond the teasing eroticism, Prince had a real purpose. He was challenging people on a sexual, social, and even political level, urging people to think about themselves and what they can do rather than just simply accept what's been outlined for him. And that was very dramatic. Dirty Mind is what started making the changeover. He had his core set. He was so articulate at expressing his philosophy as an artist.
Uptown's more or less a state of mind. It has nothing to do with financial status. It all has to do with how free you are inside and how good you feel about yourself and how strongly you feel about yourself and what you stand for and your beliefs. Me and my group and other people like us that we hang around, we get a lot of slack for our clothes and the way we act and things we say. And the first impression they get is that we're gay. When they don't understand something, people where I come from, they usually just write it off as being gay.
I think there's always leaver's remorse to a certain extent. It's like, okay, now what, genius?
They told me that she was very religious and that she became uncomfortable with the subject matter. But they didn't really tell me about the kissing on stage and stuff first. I think it's a good thing they didn't tell me that. Bobby talks about it and just poor Gayle, some nights Prince would kiss her for just minutes on end.
I just didn't want to sing those words.
Our families grew up together. There were 3 kids on Lisa's side, 3 kids on my side. And growing up in that kind of environment, we were very well versed with what it's like to be musicians. We knew the difference between entertainment and artistry. We had bands together with our siblings. There was an unreleased record on A&M, Waldorf Salad. My father and her father are also the ones that were the band for the Partridge Family. My dad was Shirley Jones, and Lisa's father was the little girl.
My dad would take me to the studio with him sometimes, and he was a real studio musician. It was perfect to meet Prince, who was such a maniac in the studio. Yeah, a friend of mine got a job working for Steve Farnoli, Prince's manager, and he put the word out that he needed a girl to replace Gayle. I didn't know who Prince was at the time. He picked me up at the airport and started having second thoughts because I wouldn't look at him in the eye. And I was quiet and strange. And that's the pot calling the kettle black, right? I mean, so we got to his house and he kind of pointed. The piano's downstairs. And he went to the phone to call his manager and say, "She's not the one, send her home." I don't know what I was playing, but he said he heard me playing some crazy chords and stuff. And he said, "Never mind," and hung up the phone and came downstairs and we started playing together. Yeah, he didn't tell me then. He was still kind of checking me out. And so I did go home.
I'm in the kitchen of the Coleman's house in Hollywood Hills. She's just come back from Minneapolis. She comes back with a cassette of Head. And to hear her voice say, I'm just a virgin and I'm on my way to be wed, it was uncomfortable for her to say. The way she speaks, it was so innocent sounding, makes this whole song freakier.
Between Prince and myself, I think we sort of just explored it and then conceived. You know what I mean? So it was back and forth, but I did see that in what he was doing, and I loved it. I loved that it was outrageous. And I moved out there within another week. So it was like 2 weeks from idea to like, I live in Minneapolis. It was pretty fast.
Co-wrote the music on the song Dirty Mind and then played the solo on the song Head. He just wanted my flavor. He had come to the conclusion he wanted to get some input from other band members. The song Dirty Mind happened because we were jamming at the rehearsal space one day and I just happened to hit that chord progression improvising. Once we completed Dirty Mind, he had me come back another day and said, hey, why don't you do a solo on this song? It was just improv all the way.
I felt like I was on some different end of the spectrum because other people that were involved were making money, you know, and getting credit. And I felt, you know, on the outside of that.
Well, here's the thing. You know, Prince and myself, we wanted to write some songs. And so we wound up going out there for that particular project. And I wrote this song that wound up on one of his albums, Do Me, Baby. At the time, we had written so much stuff together that I never really thought about. And I didn't really understand publishing and all that other kind of stuff. You know, it's just not, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, and it's not, you know, and the thing is that there's recordings of it, you know, I have recordings of it, of the song that I did.
He knew a good idea when he took it. If he didn't respect you, you were kind of rolled out to the curb, and that was that, you know, he learned what he needed to learn, and now you could move on.
You know, I never made an issue of it. I think it was more of an issue for other people. Other people made an issue, and that's how it even became an issue. I never went out and said, oh, this, that, you know, and I don't think you do it. I mean, I hope, you know, I want to hope and want to think that people don't do things like that maliciously. But, you know, I just kept it moving. There were other issues that came up.
I find that most people are pretty respectful in front of my face. When they're not around me, sometimes you hear them say some pretty hurtful things. And I don't know if they think it won't get back to me or if I don't care or if I think I'm above it or whatever. But I remember them as I remember them. We were in love then, we should be in love now. It's a hurtful place, the world in and of itself. We don't need to add to it. I hope people, when they hear that, they don't think that I'm going to lash back out at them because I'm not like that. I've never done that.
He wanted to be a solo artist like Prince. He didn't like being just a sideman. Didn't want to wait several years for Prince to succeed and be the guy that was Prince's right-hand man, sideman, best buddy, / whatever.
And I literally did the last part of Prince's tour for free. So I didn't make any money. So I was like straight broke. In this situation, I can't really live the kind of life I want to live. I have aspirations and goals. I never thought I was going to be in somebody's band where I have to wait for somebody to kick me down. It's not my personality. I ain't really making no money. Somebody else has a house with this dope shower and this dope tub, dope car. I'm like still at my mom's crib. And I know I'm all involved in everything. And it's like I'm starting to ask those questions. I can't even really take my girl to the movies. This ain't making no sense. Hey, you know what? I wish you all the best.
With Andre, Prince actually told me, he came home. I lived with Prince's girlfriend, Kim Upshur. We all kind of lived together like you do when you're in your 20s. And he said, I fired Andre. It's like, you can't fire Andre. He's your brother. Yes, I can, and I did. And he's not in the band anymore, and we're going to get a new bass player. And, you know, he got really serious. I think he was freaked out himself, you know, because he just got a little bit more mean.
Well, I have a mean side.
Try to, like, you know, convince everyone that had to happen.
Sometimes I'm a little bullheaded in my ways. Hopefully people understand that. There's just a lot on my mind, and I try to stay focused on one particular thing. I try not to hurt nobody in the process. There are themes and there are songs,
and they all go together to make this painting. I'm the painter, y'all the painting.
I don't know. I just need to see if there's a place for me to do what I need to do, because I was always writing my own music. I was always doing my own thing, and I've never thought I was going to be in somebody else's band not doing my own thing.
He was doing his thing. That was his thing. And I know how Prince was strong, man. You know, I mean, he would like wrestle you down, and, you know, maybe Andre was just sick of competing, you know.
You know, I'm a fighter. I'm very competitive.
I felt like I was losing my identity. There's a lot of me in what was going on at the time.
If you're jamming and you come up with this like dope bass part, like, but then when it actually goes to be recorded for the record, and the bass part is still like, if that normally happened, we'd have a problem.
Just, I was always myself. I'm always going to be myself. I was definitely myself then, you know, and you got to hope that people respect that, because if they don't, you know, there's not much you can do about that. That's their problem. And I just felt like, you know, I wanted to, before it became, you know, too far, you know, and maybe it had, it's hard to say, you know, at some point, you know, you go, you know what? It's that time. I think when it was happening, he just wanted things to be the way he wanted them to be. As much as I loved him and still love him, it's important for everybody to be themselves.
My best friend, Andre Cymone, his brother, Eddie, I'm entirely indebted to in this regard. He used to tell me, man, your songs are better than anybody's on the radio. You can do whatever you want to do.
I wound up seeing, you know, a bass player and said, you might want to go check this guy out. And that guy wound up being a bass player. People tell a whole different story, and maybe it was different. I have no idea. All I know is that's what I did, because I didn't want to leave, because he was still my friend. I didn't want to leave him with nothing. So, you know, I literally went to some clubs in Minneapolis, saw a guy that had a similar style, and gave him a heads up.
But from my little perspective, you know, I know that my last gig with Prince's band was in France. And that's where I left my trench coat and, you know, and called it a day.
And Andre had his own opinions too, but I thought that front line, those three guys, would complement Prince. I still think it's the greatest front line that's ever been in rock and roll. And I was really proud to be behind that, because they were just bad.
I was very grateful. I had Dr. Fink with me, Matt from St. Louis Park, you know, Prince, Andre. You know, we're from Minneapolis. We had each other. It was comforting that we did it together. It took a while for the thing to happen. It was starting to happen.
His whole thing was a great outlet for me, and I really appreciate the people that were able to put that together. Owen Husney, being able to take him and then, you know, through him, myself, and get us from where we were, just doing local stuff, to being on the world stage.
Andre was trying at some point to do his own thing because he had left.
You know, to be honest with you, for one thing, there's a lot of me in what was going on at the time. If anybody knows that, you know, it would be him. You know, people would always ask me stuff that I thought they should ask him. Ask him. You know, dude is very articulate. He can talk circles around most people. I would love to be able to have him answer questions, and I would love to hear his, you know, his interpretation.
I used Andre, my bass player, on Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad, and sang a small harmony part that you really could. There was a typo error and he didn't get credit, and that started. I tried to explain that to him, but when you're on the way up, there's no explaining too much of anything. People are going to think what they want to.
There was no animosity between the two of you guys. Are you guys still friends?
Oh, we're still friends.
Good friends?
It was time to move on. You know, we did that. It was a good relationship. I have mostly fond memories of it, you know, and I learned from it.
I just wanted to try a new direction, you know, and bring in some new music.
The record company wasn't crazy about it, because they wanted hits and they wanted to sell and they wanted to be just like what Prince was doing. And
well, it's a story behind it, though.
Yeah, the production, I think, began with, began with Cymone, but then Evelyn Champagne King, I did a song for her, which was Face to Face, which was the name of her album. And I did half, and Leon Silvers did the other half. And it was very cool. I cut it at Sunset Sound. Interesting, because there was a song on her album called Let's Get Crazy. Yeah, it was before it, but it was at Sunset Sound. And I think he somehow thought that, you know, and so I'm literally driving down Highway 100, you know, right near 50th and French, you know, near that Denny's. This purple BMW, you know, comes honking, you know, and pulls me over. So we pull over to the side of the freeway, and he's like, I just want you to know, I didn't steal your song. I didn't steal the title. Mine's called Let's Go Crazy, not Let's Get Crazy. I'm like, I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, good seeing you. You know, I don't know what you're talking about. Cool. And then later I heard Let's Go Crazy. And I was like, now I see what he's talking about.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
now I get it. Yeah, because, you know, it was actually classic because we were in the studio and Owen was in the studio. And I'll never forget this and it was the first time Owen had seen Prince in a long time because you know, they had split, you know. And Owen, I think Owen at the time was still managing me. You know, it seems like it would make sense because that's the only reason why it would be at the studio. But I was working on Evelyn Champagne King's album, and we were in the studio, and then Prince came in. Maybe he came in when we were doing Let's Get Crazy. I don't know. But he came in and he saw Owen, and Owen looked, and the energy was just weird. Owen's chair just flipped up, and Owen fell. And Prince was like, and he walked out of the studio.
Get pretty fun. Your latest single is The Dance Electric, and we have a video for that we're going to play in a minute. But why don't you tell me briefly about this song, exactly what The Dance Electric is about. This is a song that was written by Prince, isn't it?
It's the song itself is about just peace, love, everybody loving each other and things like that. The video is about, it's like a dance marathon supposedly taking place in the future. And there's aristocrats all around watching the common people, so they're trying to present it, you know, so that's what it's about.
All right, well, that's good enough intro. Let's play the video, and we'll talk some more with Andre Cymone, who's with us live right here on the video. So this is The Dance Electric.
We know you gave Andre Cymone the song Dance Electric for his new album, and we know that you two had some kind of falling out a few years back. When and how did you patch things up?
I saw him in a discotheque one night.
Pretty much almost just like that. He pretty much hit me up and said, hey, I got this song, do you want it? Oddly enough, I said no first. I was like, because I was like, man, I'm doing my own thing. He's like, man, it's perfect for you because it's very Andre. I've always been very vocal, protests, and I've always been, basically militant. And if you listen to the lyrics to Dance Electric, it's in that vein.
And I grabbed him by his shirt and I said, better come on, get this hit. You know I got this hit, don't you? Dance Electric? It's funky. It's funky.
When he asked me to do it, I was like, nah, and went back and forth. And then obviously I mentioned it to my manager, and they thought it was a great idea. Then I mentioned it, and then he mentioned it to the record company. They thought it was a wonderful idea. All of a sudden, everybody's, yeah, which is great, And so I was like, yeah. And so he came down, and because I was at Ocean Way doing the album, and he came down with his dad, which was great because me and his dad are real tight. And so it was great to see him, and so we just, he had already had it recorded, and just, man, all you gotta do is a vocal on it, and and that was it. We did the vocal and we just kind of, hung out and jammed a little bit, and that was it.
You need this. Hey, come here. Don't you play. Hey. No, you're not crazy. I'm crazy. I'm the one that's crazy. Okay? What you gonna do? You gonna come by? For real? You ain't mad or nothing?
Because he was hot and he was doing this thing, and originally I didn't want to do it, because, it wasn't like I was looking for somebody to throw me some sort of a lifeline.
So what? Yeah, tomorrow. No?
Because, I thought it was really cool originally. I thought, you know what, or when I finally said it, because obviously the record company loved the idea. Yeah, I really didn't appreciate that. Yeah, because it was that was a problem for me. Like that. I was doing my thing, and I wasn't doing it trying to get some, hit or anything like that. I was trying to do it on my own terms, And so when he came and said, are you interested in doing this song? I got this song. It's perfect for you, And that's how it was originally presented. And I thought, that's really cool. I thought, you know what, that's cool, you know? And so that's how it was in the spirit of when I first, you know, thought that it was a great idea, you know, but then when I saw that whole thing, okay, now see, this is why, because then it was like, yeah, I told Andre to come get this hit. He knows he needs this hit. And it was like, all of a sudden, then it ain't so cool anymore, because it ain't like, you know, we're boys and he's just, you know, because I would never do that. But anyway, I mean, so then it gets into that whole, you know, childish thing for me, at least from my standpoint, being childish. You know, I guess I probably should have just let that roll off my back. I don't take kindly to anybody cracking jokes about any aspect of anything I'm trying to do, because I take what I do serious.
So then I got broke again, and I was like, okay, well, I got to make some money. So maybe I met Jody, and I thought, you know what? You know, she's got an amazing voice. Let me just work with her. I wrote some songs for her, and she liked them. And we fooled around and got, you know, a string of hits, and then she won a Grammy Award for Best New Artist.
Yeah.
Thank God, thank my producers, Andre Cymone.
I think I was blackballed or something.
Really?
So I really, you know.
Why would you be blackballed?
Yeah. That's a really good question. You know, I just found out from a lot of different people that, you know, man, I heard you were blackballed.
I felt this.
And every time
I felt the same way, but we'll talk offline about that, man.
Hey, listen.
I want to ask you some questions.
Nothing was surprising because I was trying to do a lot of different things. And it seemed like, you know, things that should have been easy and no-brainers kept being things that seemed to be obstacles for some really bizarre reason.